Tron with you on 740 KVOR, number 540-0740. We will get to your calls, but first I want to get with Tom Harris. He's the Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. He joins us now on 740 KVOR. Tom, Merry belated Christmas. Happy New Year, my friend.
Yeah, well, Happy New Year to you. Down in Colorado, I'm looking at your climate down there, your temperature, and I'm saying, wow, you don't have the polar vortex.
No, that's exactly right. Now, what part of Canada are you in right now?
I'm in Ottawa, Canada, and we're in minus 24 right now, minus
beautiful.
24 Celsius. Wind chill, I don't know, maybe minus 30. It's, I was counting. I was out walking, and I had 5 layers of clothing on, boy.
Well, okay, so I guess I'm not going to start complaining. It has been cold here, but not frigid like where you are, Tom.
Yeah. And, people are going to start saying this is unusual, but in fact, it happens most winters, where the polar vortex will break off. It becomes weak, and it allows the jet stream to go way down south, and the cold Arctic air then penetrates down, down into even as far down as South Carolina.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly right. And you know this. You live for this stuff.
Well, the interesting thing is that I trained as an engineer, but, and I used to do the writing actually on the side about energy and environment and climate. And I was originally on the side of Al Gore, if you can believe that.
I remember talking to you about this, yes. Al Gore.
And it was only when I came in touch with a geologist, and he started to show me the geologic record of what the climate has done over the eons, and he showed me there was no correlation with CO2. I mean, it just isn't there. And that's why when they talk to specialists, they almost never talk to geologists, because they would say, oh, well, it's cooled since around the year 1000, since the Roman warm period when Christ was born. It's actually cooler than hottest time since the last ice age, which was around 8,000 years ago, and that we're in
those were the days.
Well, the current interglacial is certainly a good thing to be in. You wouldn't want to be in the 90,000 years of ice age.
No.
So, okay, what's wrong with a bit of climate change?
Oh, exactly right. And Tom, by the way, and that's why I'm so glad we have coal. I'm so glad we have a coal-fired plant here in Colorado Springs. It's called Drake. I can see it out one of my windows at home, and it's a beautiful thing. It makes it great for a Christmas card. Next year I'll use it. But coal, the left, they just don't like coal. Why is coal a critical key to enabling parts of our president down here in the United States of America's new national security strategy, sir?
Well, one of the main things is that you have 2 of the 4 pillars of national interest identified in the NSS is the national security strategy. It's to promote American prosperity. So you obviously want to have your inexpensive coal, and it's much, much less expensive. We can talk about the numbers later. And you want to advance American influence. Okay, so that means you want to be a player in the world energy market. Right. In the United States, this is something most people don't realize, but the United States has more coal than any other nation on Earth, about something like 22% of all the coal reserves.
That is absolutely accurate.
Right, and it's interesting because, your coal is actually quite inexpensive, too. So if you could get it to market in China, for example, you would make an absolute fortune. But on the West Coast, in Oregon and Washington, California, the Enviros have succeeded in stopping the construction and the expansion of coal export stations. So you got all this coal, you can't get it to the market. And in fact, right now, the United States doesn't export any more coal than does Poland. Okay? And yet you have unused mine capacity, and this is something people don't realize. The unused mine capacity, because the United States has been going down on coal ever since Obama basically declared a war on coal.
Sure did.
The unused capacity of American coal mines is equal to the total exports of Australia, and Australia is the world's biggest exporter. So you have a golden opportunity to not only make a fortune, but to become very influential in world markets, especially in the coal area. And that is one of the goals of the national security strategy, is to increase American influence.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. And we've got these people that put the obstacles in front of us. I mean, I know we're making some inroads with the EPA and so forth, and obviously coal plants. We've opened a couple of them. People have gotten their jobs back, but it is a slow process to, I would call it repairing the damage done by these people out there that really aren't seeing this for the reality that it is. We have all of this energy. We should use it, and if we don't want to use it all, we can sell some of it too.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to realize that, when they say war on coal, I mean, who really pays, who really cares if they pay twice or 3 times as much? It's the poor that care the most.
That's exactly right.
So if the left really cared about the poor, they would be encouraging the development of really, truly clean coal stations, But here's the other thing. It's not just the clean power plan that has to be gotten rid of, because the clean power plan actually deals with today's operating plans. But there's another plan. It's the new source standard, okay? It's got a long title here. I won't read the whole thing out.
Right.
But basically, it limits carbon dioxide emissions on new coal-fired stations to only 1,400 pounds per megawatt hour of electricity. And even the super clean stations, they're called supercritical, they're very high temperature and high pressure, those stations are among the cleanest in the world. A friend of mine was one of the top energy experts in Egypt before the recent dictator took over, and he was on a tour in Sweden, and they took him to a coal station, which was right beside a kindergarten. And there was no problem, because these coal stations, when you use the latest technology, the cleanup is almost perfect, and you end up with using a very inexpensive fuel in a very clean way. But because of this new source standard, this rule that Obama put forward in 2015, it became a law then, you can't build these new stations because they put out too much carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide, of course, is not a pollutant.
No, it's not.
So instead, you have to keep your old stations running longer and longer, because you can't build these new clean stations like they're doing in India, China, and Europe, and all over the world. So this is why the war on coal is actually a war on a cleaner environment, because we can't build the clean stations.
No, we can't. And by the way, again, you mentioned people out there, people that are significantly hurting as far as income goes. They need cheap energy. They need inexpensive energy. Right now, that's what we have is coal. Now, you talk about these other plants out there. They're being used, and the proof is there. As you said, there's one right next to a kindergarten, and it's not causing any problems at all. Now, I'm wondering, Tom, do you have a link that people can look at this and read more about this as we're speaking?
Yeah, sure. I had an article in the Washington Times, and I should put it top of our website, and I'll do that after we speak. But our website is climatescienceinternational.org, and in that article, you can actually see the price differential between coal and renewables. And I have a quote directly here from the CEO of Murray Energy, and he says, coal generating electricity typically costs 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Renewable sources are 26 cents. And they get 4 cents per kilowatt hour from the taxpayer. So you realize that, it's kind of like a boutique energy source, wind and solar. And the sad thing about wind power is that it has very strong environmental detriments.
Sure does. Kills birds. Yeah, that's not cool.
That's right. They killed millions of birds. And in fact, in places like in Spain, there's a group there called Save the Eagles International. And you can look that up on the web. And they talk about the enormous number of bald eagles and all kinds of endangered birds that are wiped out by these things. Now, the interesting thing is a lot of birds are killed by stationary things, too, like buildings. But the problem with the blades is that they move quite quickly. And the birds don't notice them. They see a clear airspace, and they say, let's suddenly chop. Exactly
right. No, that's true. And here's the thing, Tom Harris, our guest, by the way. I want to make sure everybody knows, because I want you to go and read his stuff. This gentleman is on top of this at all times. And the Washington Times article that came out the 20th. Look, why is it these environmental wackos out there, energy, oh my gosh, you have to clean energy. How come they don't worry about the other part of the environment? How about they used to say, we've got to save the whales, we've got to save the dogs, we've got to save the cats, got to save the squirrels. And nowadays, by the way, we're actually thinking about doing some urban hunting in Colorado Springs. We have such a huge population of deer. I'm sure they're going to be out there and tying themselves to a buck. But anyway, they leave that part out. Hypocrite. That's what comes to my mind, sir.
Well, also, if you really want to see what happens when you don't have energy, look at a country like Somalia.
Yeah, you freeze and you die.
That's right. And, I mean,
or you
these
burn
countries
out.
They don't care about the environment, okay? When you actually look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the environment doesn't rate very high if you don't have the energy you need to pump wells for fresh drinking water, or to store medicines in refrigerators, or to heat and cool and whatever. So, I mean, if you don't have basic, like here, minus 23 right now is the forecast for tomorrow, something like that. I mean, if you don't have enough energy, people just simply die. So the bottom line is, climate is something that we're studying, and someday we may be able to forecast the climate. It appears that we don't have a lot of influence. It appears the sun is the major generator. It's interesting. I was reading on the web just the other day that
By the way, Tom, it's -2 Fahrenheit in Ottawa, so everybody knows. And it's 16 here, Tom, Fahrenheit in Colorado Springs. So there you go.
Right. The Celsius sounds worse, but...
Winter wonderland, my friend. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Right now, we're actually seeing that the solar activity from the sun is actually declining faster than it has in thousands of years. And that's a real concern because, back in the 1600s, actually from 1645 to 1715, there was something called the Maunder minimum. Okay, this was a time when there were very few sunspots, despite the fact they were looking for them at that time. And that coincided with very severe winters in the UK and continental Europe. Yeah. That was indeed a very, very cold period. And I'm reading this article right now that says that there's a 1 in 5 chance that we're headed back to that within 40 years. Some authors say a much higher chance. In fact, it's interesting that there's a scientist out of the Pulkovo Observatory near St. Petersburg in Russia. His name's Abdus Samatov, if you can remember that. Nope. And he studies long-term cycles in the sun. Yeah. And, you have these short 11-year cycles. They don't change the sun's output by much. It's only about a 0.1% variation.
Yes.
But you see much longer period cycles, 140 years, 250 years. And once in a while, all those cycles hit rock bottom at the same time. And they call that a grand solar minimum. The next grand solar minimum is around the year 2060. And so Abdus Samatov and others say that we're going to see gradual global cooling until about 2060. And I hope they're wrong.
Yeah, for Canada's sake. I don't know if I'll be here. Yeah. Those who are, you got it. Ooh, Lord.
But that was a time. I mean, during the Maunder minimum, that was a time when they had much more extreme weather. The storms were much worse along the coast of England. I mean, complete little towns were just wiped away by storms from the ocean. And that was during a cold period. And this is where the environmentalists have it upside down. It's during cold weather that you have cold times that you have more extreme weather, okay? It's hot times when the weather tranquilizes. And if you think about it, it really makes sense. Because if global warming was being driven by humankind, the forecasts say that we would have warming first occur in the Arctic, in the polar regions. And, weather is driven by temperature differences between latitudes. So the temperature in the Arctic rises. That means the temperature difference between the Arctic and the more southerly regions, that difference becomes less. So it's kind of like rolling a marble down a ruler. If the ruler is less steep, the marble's going to go slower. So similarly, if we have global warming, we'll have less pressures forcing extreme weather. And so the forecast is we'll see less extreme weather. And in fact, if you look at the NOAA.gov website, okay, they have there the listing of when all the extreme weather records were set for every state in the Union. I have Colorado up on the screen. The maximum temperature was in 2 years. You tied 114 degrees Fahrenheit, 1933 and 1954. The minimum temperature was more recent, 1985. Most precipitation was 65. Most snowfall was 1921. So I mean, if you look at the records, the actual real records, not the computer models, what you find is that extreme weather is not increasing. You're going to have more insurance claims because there's more people and there's more things to be damaged. But the actual rate of extreme weather is actually way low, way down below the 1930s.
Tom Harris, our guest. I love talking to you. Everybody can check him out on the website. Give us the website quickly, Tom.
Yeah, sure. It's climatescienceinternational.org, and I'll put the article from the Washington Times up that shows how the war on coal is really a war on the environment and the poor.
Exactly right. Happy New Year, Tom. Let's do this again sooner than later, my friend. I love staying on top of this stuff with you.
Okay, thank you, Tron.
You betcha. Stay warm. Burn some coal.
Yeah, right.
All right, Tom, take care.
Lots of coal.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. Lots of coal. You heard the man. Thank you, Tom. We're coming right back with you on 740 KVOR. Burn that coal.